business for Tech Mahindra. And the moment the opportunity to start a startup started, he started losing the best talent. Okay, because not everybody will start thinking about starting its own business, but somebody who's already doing something good and they are more entrepreneur and have leadership quality, they'll start thinking about it. So we thought, what will happen? Suddenly, your best staff is leaving. So we started brainstorming. We started creating something called a growth factory. We said, if you have an idea, we will fund you. Okay, we'll provide you a space in the office. At least for 2 years, something like a sabbatical. Okay, but you will be given a space in the office. You start your own company. We'll have some percentage. You can use some of the resources of the organization, and we will also guide you and help you in the governance. And once your product gets in a pilot stage, we'll also allow you to go to our customers. Okay, and because we are also a percentage stakeholder in that company, it will considered as a Tech Mahindra joint venture or something like that, which is a big thing for them. As a result, across globe, it was not only for India, but our talent was across globe, and we found that thousands of ideas started coming in, and we had to create a separate organization called a growth factory. Okay, and we started incubating those startups. I'm talking about around 12 years back, 12 or 13 years, 14 years back, when we started this kind of thing, and we had so many ideas coming, and we were able to start multiple startups within our own organization. This is the way the technology organizations like Tech Mahindra, which is providing services and product, could have used it. But in addition to that, our customers, okay, AT&T was our customer, Verizon was our customer. Instead of starting something incubating in their own organization, they started investing in our organization. And they said, okay, they're going to have a hackathon with us. And if Tech Mahindra, which is focusing more on the telecom sector at that time, if we can have certain solution, they are ready to fund them. Okay, that's how the enterprises collaborating with us as a service providers started helping. So these are the two ways by providing the facility. Second was resources, some kind of funding and market, and that market was extremely important for those startups because we were able to do that. And so in those 4-5 ways we were able to do. But for us, it is how to contain the talent. Okay. In case, the main thought why it started, it was not started to see how can it be an opportunity for us to get some more revenue, creating a unicorn within your own organization, getting some 20% or 25% stake, and because of which you can do something different. But it's more of, our best talent is leaving, how can I create an environment for them so they won't go? And in case after a year or two, they decide not to continue or pursue their idea, they are with us. Okay. And that's how, we started with that idea. But this is, I think, was one of the ways we were able to retain and we were able to help many of the startups to grow.
And also moral support, right? Because when you venture on your own, you're very, very lonely in that
Lonely
sense.
and so we were able to provide them some level of uh, support in terms of
cushioning.
moral support.
Yes, and a chance to come back if they
Correct.
commit too many failures,
Yeah.
right?
So our CEO, Mr. CP Gurnani, himself was a very big entrepreneur, and he said, "I really want to create more entrepreneurs. So let's do this." So that's the kind of thing we did. Yeah.
Thank you for that perspective, Dr. Rishi. Akhilesh, coming to you, because you've led so many multi-billion dollar businesses as a program head, as a product head, and all, and especially working with Tata Communications. The last, you've been there for so many years, and we have heard so many stories about startups coming out of that collaboration. Your perspective from a product or program viewpoint.
So I'll tell you a little bit about Tata Group and more particular about communications, right? So he rightly mentioned, right? We have started seeing this. It's like two different ecosystem, right? So what you see in a startup, it's about agility, right? How you can make a fast decision. You can take some risk, right? So this is all disruptive thinking, right? Obviously, because your product is small, you can make the decision quickly. But if you really on the large enterprise side, obviously the decision making is slow. And there are obvious reasons to it, right? Because there is a hierarchy, every decision is thought through. There are pros and cons, being a large multiple, enterprise and also the startup. But I think both the system agree the thing which they are carrying and what they are not carrying are important for both of them. Like if I say from a startup perspective, they also need the ability to scale up. Most of the startup are not able to, scale up because their thinking overall, defining the market itself is very, very limited. They also do not think about some of the risk, because on enterprise level we go into very, very detailing about every risk which may come. It's legal, security, other risk. So at the Tata Group level, it was around 10 years back that we said we need to have the best of both, right? It was actually like Mahindra, it was not because of losing the talent, because within Tata Group they have got so many industries and all. But we say we need to bring this entrepreneurship within our company. We started a program called Shape the Future. And Shape the Future, like what he was saying, we have say you think any domain, you bring an idea in any domain, and we have got enough depth within the group to kind of look at and support you. And when the employees is giving the idea, there were different rounds, right? There was a regional round, there was a national round, then there was an international round. And the best thing was that the top four team, they were given that, before you present your final idea, it will be a fully paid trip to, US, the main hub of innovation, that's Palo Alto. And they've already tied up with some of the top, innovative companies like Google, Dropbox, Facebook. So all these top tech companies and all at Tata Group level, we have done that. So we have started this program. In fact, I have given one idea about edutech, right? And that time, some of these things which I'm saying right now, we thought about it that time. We have given it, so it passed through various rounds and it reached up to the top four. So I was lucky enough, and then I was given that kind of, choose 2, 3 team members. So we have done that, and we stayed there for more than a month there to understand the overall startup ecosystem. Because that time, West or mostly the West Coast was, much more evolved in terms of a startup ecosystem. So that's how we tried to bring it. Finally, my idea. So one idea we thought company will fund up totally. They will run like a startup, and that was the IoT idea, which was finally selected. And that's a one fully separate 100% subsidy of Tata Communication, right? So this is how we started using the best of both the ecosystem and bringing it together. And not only this, after 3 years, one very important program we started, and we said we will going to run it as a sawmill. This was one program to save nearly 100 millions from our existing operation by using innovative method, agility, risk taking. It was run in a very, very different way. And I'm glad to inform you that I was leading that program. We saved in 3 years $120 million. It has gone on to become one of the best Tata Group practice, and also now it is one of the case study in IM, for the student. So that's how we are trying to bring at Tata Group level. And there are few recent development we are right now doing. But yeah, maybe I'll give the chance to other, and I will talk about it in a subsequent.
Yeah, I'll pull you on that. I'll pull you on that. Anup, coming to you, because Captain Akhilesh mentioned West Coast and the US, and US has been the epitome of starting all these things up. From your perspective, how has your role, and I mean at a macro level, Microsoft been doing stuff progressively to helping startups not only in North America but also in India? If you can shed some light on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anshul. I think there was some discussion about AI earlier on, so I'll touch on that because Microsoft happens to be kind of at the frontier of driving AI technologies, and Microsoft, we see AI not really as a technology, not as a tool, as some of the earlier panelists were mentioning. We see AI as really a new way of living and working, and we're getting into that world very fast, faster than many of us realize. So we'll talk about that from a startup perspective and a partnership perspective. Right? Traditionally, there are a few things that have been happening. Right? Most organizations have this innovation center. Most organizations have, a space to co-create with customers and partners, and collaborate, prototype rapidly, and see how you can scale that. That is going to be still relevant. I think that was happening at a very use case driven in a very use case driven way, that is going to change because again, going back to the point that AI has such a power to implement whatever works in a particular organization, particular field, at scale, right? A lot of examples were given today around healthcare and even education, I would say. Ability for teachers to be having so much more preparedness with the lesson plan and so on. There's so many use cases. So you see healthcare and education, for example, transforming in the next 4 or 5 years. There will be a lot of startups that will figure out, hey, this is a space that I think AI can change the way of working, the way patient let's take an example. So today, when we go to a doctor, there is a lot of conversation, and especially in the US, doctors are spending a lot of time just putting their head down and taking notes. With the advent of AI, there is a conversational aspect to the technology. So it will basically be able to record the conversation, transcribe, summarize, and what the doctors really need to do is to hit the approve button that yes, this is the right summary, these are the actions, and the actions will flow from there. So both pre-visit, during the visit, post-visit, there is just amazing amount of rapid transformations that can happen. So we are seeing startups coming across the spectrum, not just use case based. And I think in that sense, in US, it is getting past this that use case based. We prove this, we go to market to say that hey, if we can prove this, then the value is across, across the across the value chain. And I think that's a very the other thing I would just add before we go to the next question, um, particularly Microsoft, right? So you guys, some of you might have heard there was this auto dev tool called Devin. It was a startup by a young person. He started this company within a week or two. They had more than $1 million in investment. Within a month, they had $1 billion plus investment. And what fundamentally changed from earlier, say, developer tools where there is a co-pilot, for example, in GitHub that allows you to go and complete your code. This does it pretty much on its own. All you have to do is, again, go, review, approve. So I think that's the way technology is going to have an impact. It's way more than what we realize today. Uh, and then there are a lot of ethical considerations of control and so on that needs to be. But that's where I think there is a jump from use case based innovation to a more broad based, rapid, scaled innovation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, and it's so humongous. I mean, mind-bogglingly humongous that we are not even scraping the surface yet. Rajat sir, coming to technology, like what Anup alluded to, you have been in tech space since maybe since I've known you, right? From Airtel to PVR to now your own Gen AI, ventures. Technology wise, how can, because this is a very slow moving piece, right? When you have to sell to the enterprise, they do a lot of checks on integrability of technologies and governance standards as well. How can, how can enterprises kind of catalyze this and expedite this from that perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Anshul. And I think very interesting perspectives from all the panelists. I just want to give a kind of a slightly different, perspective. Like, I was a CTO in PVR Inox, and I've been CTO in Airtel and some of the other, previous organizations. And in the larger organizations, there's a lot of politics, and there's a lot of, there are a lot of fire, and you have to constantly try and kind of douse those fires. And whenever we have been in process of acquiring a new solution, I need to buy a new ERP system, and or I have to get a new sales automation tool, or a new um, maybe core processing system. Usually, how I would do it, and not that it's the right approach, and usually how most of the enterprises and the CTOs and CXOs and the businesses do it is, they won't go, they like even today and even earlier, I'll get at least 3 4 you know companies hitting me saying we do ERP, we do SaaS, we do this. And it's very hard for us to evaluate. We are, there's very limited mind share how many companies you can evaluate. Every company is trying to position a new unique offering, right? And your businesses, your CEO, they have some expectations from you. They look to you to be the best, to decide what is the technology to buy. And usually, what we will do is we'll look at Celent, we'll look at Gartner. Gartner has this magic quadrant. I don't know how good they are, but they'll say this is the leader in the space. These are the top three. These are the top five. And usually, and I've kind of worked with Microsoft and IBM and Oracle and Google and Salesforce and Facebook's. Usually, they are in the leaders space, right? And most these companies have very extensive sales teams and very well connected to most large enterprises. And you would go and you say, okay, ERP, let's call SAP, let's call Microsoft, let's call IBM. Ask them to evaluate, do prototypes, and you decide. Right? That's the kind of process you. And if I am and we would usually we'll try and make it a little more even base, and we will look to our Indian ecosystem, see some of the good Indian companies who are established in the ERP space, who do more customization than some of the larger global partners, and we will call them also. But my experience has been it's a very tough battle to fight, right? For a startup, just getting a mind share from a you know from a CXO is very tough. And now enterprises are looking at it, and in PVR, the reason why we also partnered with startup incubators. We worked with some, and we in fact funded some of the startups. And the reason we do that, in spite of all the big companies, is that they are very narrow spaces. Like in PVR Inox, we were doing a NFT based kind of you know digital asset that we were offering to customers. And this is a very kind of new technology. I mean, all those crypto and blockchain. None of the big companies then were offering a solution. So they were very very niche spaces. So if you are a startup, you have to be really focused. And now I kind of partner with some of the guys. Like my co-founder. Randhir is also here, and he has a kind of if we have to hit enterprise, and we have built we have kind of connected with a lot of large enterprises, but we are very focused. We meet the right business sponsors. We take maybe 5-10 minutes, give them a very clear view of what we offer. And not every time and once you are in their mind, it kind of is a very long sales cycle. But they know, okay, for this very niche space, these guys are very good. This is a local company, they can do a good job. Then suddenly, like after 3 months, 6 months, suddenly when the CTO is under fire, he sees ki, boss, this guy can solve my problem, and he'll call you that I need these solutions as of yesterday. And slowly, I think it takes time, but slowly you kind of build. And once you build a few clients, I think then you kind of, and you do a good job. And that's what we do, very diligently, work very hard, you know build connects. We have a lot of good network with a lot of senior execs in the companies, and deliver a quality outcome. Then definitely I think this word spreads, and from 2 4 6 you start to build more clients. But my sense is that that is the approach. If you have to really you know kind of in Indian ecosystem compete with the Microsofts of the world, the big companies. As a startup, while companies, Microsoft, I use, this 5.3, LLMs, open source Microsoft models. I use, GitHub. My team uses a lot of Microsoft technologies, Office 365 and whatnot. But, to kind of compete, you don't have to compete in the space that they are there. Like we custom train those models. You can get the open source models from Microsoft, and then you customize it, say for a healthcare startup requirement, which is very very narrow focus, and you have an expertise in it, and then you can differentiate. No other way is what I think is gonna be easy.
I'll take your word on that, sir. Or let me start off with you now. And I do, I just would like to, because you've been in PVR, you have been in Airtel, and these have been like at the forefront of India's innovation products or solutions. Any two examples that come to your mind where the startup and enterprise collaboration has been successful in either of these or any other company that you worked in?
Yeah. So see, my sense has been that where some of the cases we have been also working, like we working with a large bank today, and they have a large kind of red herring prospectus, to be checked. These are like 700-page documents. They have very detailed, financial details of a company which wants to raise money as get listed in an IPO, and they are like hundreds of checklists, right? And see a lot of these, senior folks, and these are not like the project we are doing is not with the technology team, because they are saying our technology processes are fairly stringent, and their tech team was also there, but they are like very focused on data privacy. So your ability to find a narrow use case, work with a client to solve it, right? Building a custom like a like a 5.3 or a Llama 3, small, you know custom model. You can kind of train it on that data. You can. So my experience has been so far that you have to find the business sponsor. We've had instances like this. We have done a lot of good incubation and startup partnerships, even in PVR Inox. It's a cinema business is like very very dynamic, and it's like you have every few weeks you have a new movie release. You have to market it. You have to make something unique and exciting. We were in PVR Inox. We were one of the first to launch integration with Alexa, like Alexa, or Google Home, or Siri, that you could talk to them. And those kind of capabilities are only offered by startups, right? No big company, like most of the big companies didn't have those skill sets then. This was like maybe 5-6 years back. So you find out the startups. You find this is a very narrow use case. You want to create some excitement, traction. We did some loyalty programs. We found out smaller startups. We did a lot of data analytics work where, based on the customers' demographics, we could send targeted messaging, emails, SMSs, WhatsApp notifications about upcoming movies, offers, promotions. While there are offers and products available from larger companies, we found that Indian companies, smaller startups, were very good in iterating, very quickly turning around, customizing it for a company's requirements in India. Commercially, very very cost effective, right? Salesforce of the world and other big companies in the West were at least 3 times more expensive than the Indian startup ecosystem. So my sense is there were many such instances, but very focused, very targeted, very narrow scoped offering from a startup is something that will excite a CXO.
Absolutely. I mean, Anup, can you add to this from your perspective?
So the question was that some successful examples
Yes.
of working with startups. I mean, OpenAI and Microsoft Scott is kind of a great. Now it's become a poster child for how big innovations can be driven. But I want to take that further and I think hit some of the points around 5.3 and Llama models that Rajat was mentioning. So yes, Microsoft was lucky to kind of invest in OpenAI before pandemic, and it was not known. Generally, we knew that cognitive abilities of AI systems is getting better. We did not know it will be as rapid and as powerful, right? Nobody knew. So the technology suddenly kind of happened when the 2023 release, right, around November, and they got 1 million users in a week. So technology was there, right? And then everybody woke up to it that, hey, we are in a new world now. It's a new era, right? Google took notice. Others said they are still trying to catch up in many ways. Um, but see how technology is just not sufficient in itself. So yes, there was this capability, but then the compute requirement, for example, for large language models is so intense, so much that it's not possible for small startups to invest unless they partner with these big companies. And that is where the space for smaller language models like 5.3, they are very, very good, especially if you contain the data set, right? So you don't have to train them on the entire World Wide Web. You train them on your proprietary, data. They still have, trillion, at least billions of parameters, if not trillions, and they're getting to trillions. And with much less compute requirements, you are able to provide much more precise and contextual insights, recommendations, right? You want these AI systems to work as your agent. So it is getting there. Second, one more example, um, Khan Academy, right? So Khan Academy, they had such good educational contents available online, and people were generally using it, right? They would go and find a video and see, okay, this subject I need to learn calculus or biology or whatever. Now, with the advent of AI, now they can ask specific questions rather than go and search, right? Now, how does the AI kind of play a role in me asking the question and me getting the right answer, right? And that's where something called prompt engineering, right, became such an important thing. And Khan Academy, for example, played a big role. They had like 10 or 12 people who just prompted the system day in, day out. They trained the system on how all possible prompts and what answers the system should. So it's not just the technology; it is just training it that if the person is prompting in this way, they are probably looking for this kind of an answer, right? And all of that goes into making the whole user experience rich, and say, okay, now finally we have an AI where I can pretty much have a conversation with, or ask a pointed question, and it gives me back a pointed answer. By the way, there's a company called Perplexity. I'm sure a lot of us have heard, which is basically built on this concept. You ask a pointed question, you get a point, right? And it's a big disruptor to Google, being funded very, very handsomely in the US. It's a unicorn already, yeah. Hope that answers. But those are some of the examples of how startups and big companies can make an impact, and also how it takes a whole ecosystem to get to that user experience.
Thank you.
Like City is a Indian unicorn, right? It's like set up by
Yes.
Indian, so it's like maybe must be the first new unicorn of this year, which has kind of turned unicorn. So no, absolutely, I kind of resonate with what you're saying.
And it's so fascinating, right? I mean, every week, if I have a conversation with you, you'll probably come up with two more examples which are more advanced and doing a lot more work there. Captain Akhilesh, coming to you, any two? I know you've done so much, so extracting just two is difficult, but there you go.
So, as we talked about, startup need to look into the very niche space, right? So otherwise, enterprise will have a portfolio, bouquet of portfolio. But the opportunity lies not taking on head on, right? Because then you may be competing, you have to build that scale, you have to build that technology, the processes, the system layer thing. And obviously there are many things, once you are looking at, you're just looking at your product, domain knowledge is there, that product is there. But to be a successful in market, right, there are so many other things which you have to look. As we, earlier discussion, we were saying there are some startups who are just chasing the revenue goals, right? They are not looking at the EBITDA since beginning. And when the investors start asking question about the real money, right, which is your EBITDA, and the profit coming to you, and they try to get the EBITDA, then their entire model become disrupt. So since beginning they need to look at. Second is because of the security, right? The kind of, we have seen fiasco which happened yesterday, right? So there are many things on the security sides, and the other side they need to ensure that their systems or their product is having that security layer. Most of them, don't look at it. Also, some of the ability to scale up. In fact, when we do the market calculation, because we are starting new, the horizon is very limited, but it's a ability to look at much wider. I think that's something which both enterprise and startup can work on. Just to go into the few important things, like when we were doing our IoT portfolio, there were many capabilities which we thought will make lot of time to build up. Because in a large enterprise, there is a NPI, which is new product introduction. It's a full chain. It has got a different stages, right? Again, I say it has got advantage and disadvantage. Advantage because you look at it in a very critical thinking. Every stage gate is being done, and then once your product is thing, it's a market ready. But on the other side, a startup can just bring it quickly. And we also started doing it saying 1 3 30. So we bring a stage, do a product in early stage, and say stage one. And then we collaborate with customer, tell him that this is work in progress, and then we'll work with you. But at the same time, we look at startup who bring that particular niche. Like in our overall enterprise space, we deal in B2B connectivity to the large enterprise, other large enterprise. The security was one thing which we realized is very important, because by the time we built in our portfolio, it will take a lot of time. So we worked with 2 3 startups who were dealing in a very niche space of security and made it a part of our overall. They also get access to a large customer base, information, also the all the information and the technology which was already available. So it was a win-win situation both in IoT and security. From my point of view, there are a lot of steps which are taken at the overall Tata Group level to bring a lot of startup ecosystem into our overall portfolio, right? So we are looking at very specific niche opportunity where we can bring that startup, how that system will work, right? How that valuation and other thing work, because sometimes we find that valuation expectations are very, very high. So anyway, that's a different discussion. But as going forward, you will see not only from one company, but many Tata Group companies will be having a much better collaboration with the startup, but it will not be a very generic thing. It's going to be in a very, very niche space. So this is how this entire ecosystem is going to move on.
And I think all three of you kind of concur on this point that it has to be very much focused in a very niche area
Niche.
and solve a very particular problem, then maybe
Okay.
generalize from there, right? Dr. Rishi, my question to you would be startups are doing this for enterprises, but at the same time, they have to keep a watch on their runways, on their unit economics as well. How do they manage all these things together?
So, Anshul, in the earlier time, not too early, but the startups as an ecosystem started, it was not these college graduates who were starting a company.
Right.
It was a person who has done some work in some company, having some knowledge of what is the gross margins, what is the net margin, how the profitability can be calculated, or some level of understanding about that, who are going and starting a business. But suddenly, you are going to start seeing, we have started seeing that a college graduate who have not even completed his graduation has started a startup. And these young boys and girls do not have that experience to understand that they have to start thinking about a unit economy. And they have to start thinking about what is the gross margin. And if I'm going to scale, how will I have the net margin, which is going to be positive? They do not have that understanding. And it has been a challenge because I have been mentoring many and I have invested in many. And one of the reason and what I'm trying to make them understand is कि यार तेरा gross margin क्या है ये तो बता उसको समझ में ही नहीं आता gross margin होता क्या है. Okay, and then we have to start calculating and showing them that this is how you need to calculate what is your gross margin. This is how you're going to scale, and that's how you're going to create a net margin which is going to be positive. So once you're going to scale to this level, so it's a problem, and how to make it aware, how to having those incubation center where you're going to have a train, and the previous panel also discussed about that if you're going to have some kind of a certification or a course before you can apply for a startup, if you are applying for a startup, at least you should be qualified to do certain things. Okay, and unless you have this knowledge of this unit pricing, something which is very basic for me, only having an idea is one thing. Scaling that idea to a profitable level is another thing. If you're looking for an investment, a person is going to invest only when they're going to see that there's some return out of it. So if you want to start a startup and it's not a jugaad, it has to be a proper governed organization. There's a need for some level of checklist to be created, which is going to help in making those people. Otherwise, the mentorship program, one of the thoughts which we already which we had was, how can we have certain mentors available? How can we have certain chartered accountant groups available? How can we have some legal organizations available whom they can consult? Not a large money, but at least, I'm stuck here. What should I do? I need to calculate this. What can I do? We need to create that kind of ecosystem. It's not only just a venture capitalist organization helping you in getting some money, but also helping in you in getting some knowledge about this is a legal kind of contract. Because we have seen many of the young startups getting stuck into the GST issues, getting stuck into the legal issues, and they're getting some. Nobody wants to get into any legal hassle. Nobody wants to get a notice from a GST account department and get stuck into it. But these young boys and girls, because they initially don't, they won't have that knowledge. But not having a knowledge is not an excuse in front of a government agency or any of the regulator. You will say, "मेरे को तो पता ही नहीं था." It's not a reason for you not doing it. Okay, you will get stuck and you will have to pay penalty. Okay, so awareness and some level of you need to go through this course or you need to get to this thing before you. And if there is some organization is trying to give a certification for a startup, at least they say, okay, these are a group of mentors you can get mentorship from. At least these things can help. Otherwise, because suddenly you're going to see a young college boy, not even completed his graduation, has started a company, will have that kind of challenges. I'm very happy they're doing it. They have idea. I'm extremely happy about that. But how can we people who have some knowledge can help them out is what is required. But I just want to tell you two more things because the first question was on the enterprises helping out. I have personally invested in multiple companies. Two of my companies extremely got benefited by the enterprise support. One of them is FluxGen, which is on the water technology, which was supported by Microsoft and Cisco. And Microsoft took them globally. Okay. And they have taken them for a sustainability point of view, water management. They have taken them globally and they are now doing quite a good amount of work through Microsoft. And Cisco is using them as their partner for smart cities, for all water management.
Okay.
So there are many of those, but second one is the Kindly Health. It's a health organization providing in the IVF kind of. Apollo invested in them, and Apollo is supporting them throughout the country by their large infrastructure which is already available. Okay, so there are many of such kind of examples, but I thought these two should be good for people to know that an Indian and a multinational kind of organization supporting an Indian startup, taking them to globally or into certain areas within the country, and the Indian enterprise in the healthcare sector, taking them to the whole of the country. It's very beneficial.
Absolutely.
Thought. So I think once like he mentioned that you may be just very expert in a particular product, right? Very niche, but you may not be having the idea about the entire ecosystem, right? Domain, sales, marketing, financing, valuation, right? And obviously large enterprise will like you to come up to a particular standard, right? So in this ecosystem, I see like Xscale as a accelerator playing a very important role because there from a just a product specific offering you are taking up to a scale where it's working as a overall self-sufficient mechanism. So so if I see enterprises here, startup is this side, but within that ecosystem there has to be some connector and enabler. So I see one is in terms of providing them all these, starting from regulatory to security, these accelerators and these organizations are going to play a very important role. And second is the CRM, right? So they may not be able to afford the very costly CRM. So if they are developed the CRM, which are like one is pay per use, obviously that's the trend now, and also not so costly in terms of it goes beyond their ability to pay. So these are the few connector on the technology side, on the domain side, which will help bringing the ecosystem of startup and large enterprise connecting each other and together.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So, gentlemen, I'll kind of put the last question to everybody on this panel, and this is for our startups and SMBs to kind of ponder upon. What are your top two suggestions to smaller companies, startups, and people building stuff that they should be keeping in mind from your perspective to build sustainable, sellable businesses? Not go for funding and all, grow organically in that sense.
Let me start. So I always ask any of the person who's thinking about a startup that they have to answer two questions: who will buy, and why will they buy? If they have answers to these questions, who will buy and why will they buy, then only they should start. Otherwise, they're wasting their time. Okay. So though, if you ask for two things, these two answers: who will buy and why will they buy. Okay.
Thank you.
No, thanks. I think very rightly mentioned. So it is very important to define the customer problem into the great detail. Sometimes what we do not define that problem. We quickly make up our assumption and put it into the implementation. Right? When our product is ready, we realize the market, the problem was something else. Right? So as a startup, yes, and I think many times you will not get the first time right. So as you are building up your product, bring that innovation and the agility to change even midway. And sometimes by the time you define the customer problem, start build up your problem, the actually problem or the market demand has changed something, right? It's changing so fast with the advent of technology. So you need to be have that kind of agility to change it fast. And second thing, when we are looking at most of the startup, as I say earlier, also just looking from the revenue point of view and through revenue, the valuation. I think the moment we have this goal of getting a good valuation and not making an organization which is a self-sufficient, right? That's a very important. So from the same time, what he's asking, why somebody will buy and why somebody will pay you the money where you can make profit, right? That's another important aspect to this. So the EBITDA part or the profitability part has to kept in mind from the day one. I think that's been missing. And the last is when you scale up. Most of us also miss that picture when we scale up. What are the different difficulties or issues are going to come up? So think about you have to scale up, including your security, your different functions, market demand, how we are going to work on this. So these three things, I think that will ensure that you are in a good shape. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I think well said. And I'll take what they said one step further and say, when people ask me, what defines a company, right? And people have different definitions. And I always say, when you have a customer, a paying customer, that's when you have a company, right? And you don't even need for the first one or two customers, you don't really need to make a lot of money, but just get a referenceable customer who would vouch, right? That's worth a lot. So that's the tactical aspect for startups. I think he touched on the strategic aspect as well, which is they need to think about scale. And it's a very different game when the company is scale because the impact, and especially today, as we touched on the topics of AI and so on, a lot of repeatable or lower level work will be done in the coming days by AI. So it is important for these startups to have a very good view of the domain of what impact they are driving. How do they move from use case to a broad industry level impact in whatever industry they are playing in? So having that strategic view and then translating it back into, do I have systems? I think Rajat was talking about, not looking at ERP systems or CRM systems, but do they have the right structures and systems that will help them scale, and the partnerships around? I think everybody touched on it. So just having those two aspects, having a customer that would stand up for your work, and having that vision that if you do well, if you scale, how would it look like, and organize early on for that. I think those would be the two things I would say, Anshul.
Thank you so much, Anup. Rajat, आप बताइए.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one thing which is very important is that if it has to be sustainable, a growing startup, you have to have a lot of perseverance, right? You have to be very excited about the domain or the technology. You have to have some passion for it. So I think it's very important that because it will be a long, arduous journey that and you have to spend 12, 14, 18. I think NRN said 70 hours work week. You may have to spend 140-hour work week. So you have to be really passionate about what you are wanting to solve, what problem you are going to work on, and persevere. Keep your costs low, spend as low as possible, partner with more people. Don't try seek help. Try and reach out like Xscale and co-founders. try and build a good network of people who are also doing startups, because you will get a lot of good advice. Primarily, I think these are the things which I feel are very important that you should keep in mind.
Profound thoughts, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time. The floor is open to questions. Anyone?
Thank you so much for so much insightful information. I think when I was hearing all of the panelists, one of the questions that came to my mind was, and I've seen this in real life as well. If you are a startup and you have a new product and it's very niche, also, right? Tomorrow you go to a company like Microsoft or Tata, hypothetically, for example, the first question that comes up is your product is very nice. You end up talking to the CIO or whoever that is, and the next question is how old is the company? As soon as you say that we're only 1 year old, I mean, I we could end up lying and say that we're 5 years old, but all of that comes up in background checks, right? But if you tell the truth and you say that you're only 1 year old, you're only 8 months old, and you have a team of only 4 engineers, which are the co-founders, then I think automatically the trust lifts up and they just reject you, even if you've had multiple conversations, even if they've loved the product, even if you've done a pilot. So, out of curiosity, I wanted to understand how do you circumvent the situation wherein you're a very young company, you're only 6 months old, 8 months old, or 1 year old, you have 5 engineers working with you, and still you want to convince an enterprise who's very impressed already, but their only blocker is that, "Are ye company to itni young hai? What if they shut down tomorrow?" So I just wanted to understand how do you circumvent in case of enterprises.
Yeah, I'll just start and then others. So I was giving you the example of this company called Cognition AI, right? It was a week old when companies like Microsoft and others invested in them in millions, right? And I think the proof there is that um, if the ecosystem sees potential in your startup, they will start backing you up. That will more than make up for the lack of experience that you're talking about when you go to even enterprises. And you don't have to start with enterprises, but even if you go to enterprises, if you have a backing of some well-known brands in the industry, I think that is way more valuable than 5 years of experience. I think the respect for that, I'm 5 years old and all, is rapidly diminishing, how I would see it.
So I like. So first you have to think from the CIO perspective, right? And that's a reality what you said. See, if you look from his point of view, he has to look at the entire product portfolio, right? So you may be one person who is pitching. There may be other companies also who must be pitching for this, right? So if everything is equal in terms of your product capability, obviously he is going to prefer someone who has worked more, right? Because it's not only about the product, but it's about the person who's developed the product, and he should have the confidence that you are going to take it up, right? And I'm going to tell you why he's preferring somebody who has got a more experience but the same product capability. See, the person who will finally get in is the person who will not only look at his own product. Most of the time we go and we pitch our product that these are the niche, these are the thing, right? The way to do it, you go into the product portfolio of that company, understand what the gaps in that product portfolio, and then you pitch that how your product is going to fill these gaps, right? If you are able to get it right, then he's that CIO or that board or that particular team, leadership team, if they are sure that you are going to fill that gap, you are going to get in despite having the less experience. But most of us don't go with that kind of homework to look into our potential customer into portfolio and fit that. We just pitch our product. That may again you are leaving up to that leadership team to see which one will fit best, right? So that's a thing. But if you really want to pitch in, please do the study, look into the product portfolio, fill the gap with your product, and then your proposition is much more stronger, which will compensate for any lack of experience.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, just one point, like as a because I did work with a lot of startups, and so in most organizations, like there are certain core systems and there are certain peripheral systems, right? Usually the organizations are very finicky about deciding on the core systems. Like for ERP, most organizations, we have to have a SAP or a Microsoft or an Oracle ERP. you know, for CRM, they are big players, and these are very critical core systems. If they are peripheral systems, right, there's a lot of leeway, right? They would be, if you are building something which isn't replacing the core, if you have something which is add on to a ERP, which is complementing a existing CRM system, or you have to start, even if you're building a CRM system, you have to find gaps, like we said earlier, in the ERP system, build components which are not there in the current system, so that you are easily able to plug into bigger organizations and bigger systems, and then try and spread from there. But if you are trying to replace a ERP system, unless as a CXO, my CEO will say we want the best in the world, right? Most Indian companies, mid-tier Indian companies, if you think that they are okay with the second best, no company, right? They're saying we'll pay money. Indian companies are generally relatively much better off these days. They want the best, right? So you have to be really very focused, very narrowly defined value that you will add to the company. And potentially, if it is in a peripheral thing, which is easier for the, because if I'm a CXO, I say no, don't go for SAP. My startup founder, which is like 4 people, 1 year old, they will do the job, right? Then as a CXO, my neck is on the line, right? My boss will say, okay, you are vouching for the team, right? And these are very complex systems, right? They're not easy. Companies have taken decades to build those platforms.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I just have a follow on if I can ask.
You follow up? Go ahead.
So out of curiosity, so let's say if you work with SAP, for example, right, you have SAP integrated in your organization. How do I come in and tell you that SAP has this gap, but you can fill in this gap with my extension? You can use my company's product. It sits on top of SAP, and then it fills this need. Does that pitch generally work? Okay, so I start with an extension, and then I. But what if I have a whole ERP built on my own?
So see, my
That
sense is like, we had companies, we had startups which had, small ERP systems, full-fledged ERP systems. And we had SAP in our company, right? So, but they were, like you said, there are actually a lot of gaps in these big systems, or there are certain add-on components which are very expensive, right? It will cost tens of crores just to add some additional components of SAP. And this startup had those functionalities. They had a whole ERP, but we said we need these two modules, that you have built, and it complements, our existing SAP. Does it connect to SAP? Can it be integrated? Is there a file transfer mechanism? And as long as that happened, we worked with them. We added some of these smaller ERP systems, which were peripheral to the core ERP system, but those functionalities to either customize or build in SAP would have been too expensive. And this was fast and easy. This is what my sense is would work well.
It's too much of risk. See, if you see from CIO perspective, right, its job is on getting the right per thing. So why will he not go for something which has been proven over the years, right, built with expert? So as he rightly mentioned, go for the peripheral, or if you have to look at to the next level, SMB segment, right? Go to SMB segment, which may be very, very price sensitive. There you can kind of, pitch it, because the chances of getting in the SMB segment, which is mid and small level segment, is much more, because they need, price cut, and they can take this kind of experimentation because they must be new. For a large enterprise to disturb their core ERP system is very, very difficult. Go with some peripheral or find some niche. Else, I think, that may not be right up to say you replace your entire core ERP.
I think that's right. One of the approaches is also, if you have to sell to that enterprise, they may have a research and innovation part which is requires a very small ERP. They may have a subsidiary somewhere, or a mergers and acquisition scenario. Those scenarios you can say that, hey, in a very small and not core area, I will prove out that my value proposition is significantly greater than SAP, for example, because I'm more modern and it's conversational, and you don't have to log into a gray screen or whatever. So yes, there are ways, and I think the way comes from around it versus directly attacking the core.
There's a saying in the tech circle or CXO that there is no CIO or CTO who ever got fired for hiring IBM or Microsoft. Like, it's a sad fact, but they will not get. And personally, my experiences, I remember implementing a Microsoft, Dynamics CRM in a company which was a big disaster. It didn't work. We had to replace it. But as long as you are able to justify that this is one of the best companies and still it couldn't solve a problem, you know, the management is okay. Your job is safe, right? So this is the yeah sad fact of life.
Go ahead.
On top of Salesforce SAP.
Profound thoughts. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And with that, I will end this session because we have others and lunch also waiting for us. So over to you, Nidhi.
A huge round of applause for our incredible CXO panelists. I'd now like to ask Anshul to present a token of appreciation to our panelists. Anshul, please. First, we have Dr. Rishi Mohan Bhatnagar. Captain Akhilesh Saxena. Next, we have Anup Tripathi. And now we have Rajat Tyagi.